Well, just want to say good morning, and I'm glad to see all of you out on this kind of snowy day. We're very fortunate where we live right now in the province because we were spared a lot of that heavy snow. But I know a lot of you weren't able to be here and you're watching online. So welcome to the online crowd as well today. And I just want you to, if you were able to pan the audience, you see the brave ones here. And but that's okay. Some of you weren't felt like it was okay to drive, so glad about that as well, that you didn't risk that. So I want to start by showing you a picture here this morning. And this is a picture of who? Anybody know who this is? C.S. Lewis, right? I heard somebody say that. C.S. Lewis is one of my favorite writers of all time. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. He wrote a book called Mere Christianity. It's one of my favorite books to share with people who are sort of searching and seeking and trying to make meaning of life. He wrote a book called The Grief Observed, and it is an honest portrayal of what it's like to have prayer not answered. And it's just very honest, great book. And he's written dozens and dozens of other books and sold millions and millions of copies. As I say, he's a real thinker, a real great writer. And one of the books that he wrote, and one of the more unique books that he wrote, was actually the compilation of a series of articles that appeared in a British newspaper Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. And they were compiled into a book, and the title of the book became The Screwtape Letters. And basically, the Screwtape Letters are all about this sort of master demon who his name is Screwtape. And he has this protege named Wormwood, and these series of letters are what Screwtape would say to Wormwood in order to mess up people's lives and to kind of wreck their lives. And so it was kind of this play on how could we wreck our lives. And it was written in 1941, so the language is pretty much British English, and it's pretty much formatted for that time. So I thought today I would take one of the letters that were written and I kind of bring it up to 2019, and I want to read that letter to you this morning. So it says, "Dear Wormwood, I have figured out the best way to wreck the lives of people. They won't even see it coming. Simply get them really busy doing everyday life. Get them busy at work, at home, at play, with friends, so they have no or few margins, keeping them living life at the limit. Get them so busy that it will wreck one area of their lives, but what they won't, or many areas of their lives, but what they won't know is that it bleeds out and the consequences go further than they'll ever expect. Get them busy not doing immoral or unethical things, but many things they might consider noble. Create in them this perceived hunger for personal identity and worth, and help them seek that identity and worth in all the wrong places. Help them to forget that their identity is in Christ, that they have been adopted by God, that they are loved and valued and treasured and prized, that they have been bought with a price. Convince them that there is this invisible ladder of success, and convince them that the best life possible is at the top of the ladder. Keep them comparing themselves to others on the ladder and have them compete for a higher spot, and that climbing is critical to their happiness. Remind them that it takes huge amounts of time to climb, and they must sacrifice things, even important things, to get to the top of that ladder. Keep them discontent. Make them a slave to our old friend, the monster called more. Fuel their discontentment through all kinds of media, and make them believe that if they just had something different, something more, something better, then they would be happy. This will affect them emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally. It could wreck any of those areas of their lives, but it will affect it'll affect them the most in the area of their relationships. Their greatest joy in life and the best moments of life happen in relationship, especially that relationship called family. Some wives will resent each other because they'll feel neglected of your life. It's when we crash our family. when our family crashes. It is because there is not enough time to meet all of the demands. And so there is this idea of this felt neglect and this hurt and this wound. On top of that, people are not living with enough emotional capacity today to build those kind of relationships that God intended us to live. And I think many of the roots of a crash are something to do with emotional energy or insufficient time. Yeah, there are other reasons, but I find that some of those other reasons will flow from the lack of margins as well, like money and choices. We're going to talk about that next week. And we lack space, or we make the inappropriate choices, or we have the wrong attitude. We're going to talk about that through this series. I think all of those play a part into wrecking family life. I mean, when it comes to our schedule, we all face our fair share of demands and responsibilities. We all have large to-do lists. At times, we feel like we're at the limit. I mean, there's work and family and friends and professional development and courses and leagues and clubs and serving, recreation, rest, eating, social media, video games, spiritual life. And every one of us, we only have 168 hours available to us in a week to make it all work. Research experts claim that to make it work efficiently, the way that we would want it to work in every area of our lives, if we want to successfully navigate through those areas, it would add up to 40 hours per day. There's a problem there. We only have 24 hours to make it all work. And so in order for it to work, it means we have to learn to say no to some things in order to be able to say yes to other things. And hopefully we will say no to the things that don't matter the most so that we can say yes to the things. You've got work and you've got social and you've got faith responsibilities. That's church and all of the things that go with that. You've got financial, family, and self-care. These are the way it looks today in our culture. It would look like this. We have work and family and other. We have work, push the margins either way, but these are the primary two areas that will do battle. And when I talk about work, I'm talking not just time at work. I'm talking about time developing skills. I only work 40 hours a week, but many who work 40 to 50 hours a week, they're more connected than they around the house, vacations, kids today. Families are busy with lots of demands. Work is and mine. And yet, trying to satisfy both of these pieces, challenge is that I watch many men and women subtly choose this over. And if you were to ask them, those who are the only way it could be done, or a spouse has an affair, and then they decide to leave it, all of a sudden this becomes very important when the crisis hits. But as it seems needed to have work and chores that need to be done, all the problem is not being better organized. The challenge is these two pieces primarily are what shape our identity, and how these work out and our success in either of these areas goes a long way to shaping our identity. Now, I want to add a little piece right here. Not to offend, but I probably will. One of the pieces, and the playing of video games. Or how much mind-numbing time goes into playing video games. And one of the key reasons that some of us are stretched to the limit is we have wasted time able to be used for the things that matter the most. God is not happy. This is the problem, not that. You can't say, well, see, I don't need to listen to my wife because it was a problem. The problem is not that. Because you listened to your wife, just clear that up, and ate from the fruit from the tree which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. But you did. They ate, they disobeyed, they did life their own way. He said, cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat the plants of the field, you must return. You notice how work changed and became something that was just, it took us to the woman. It was said, do a research on this. But before this, there wasn't going to give birth to children. And your desire will be for your husband. He's spoken to a husband's power, but he will rule over you. And we see that these choices led human history, and we've perfected it. And this is what creates the problem today, more and more often than we care to admit. Because we have this battle on those pieces, and many of us know that work has won that battle more times than it should. And that's why margins in our time, and we give it a credit. And because when we have margins in time and emotional energy to the people of Israel, and they've been wandering in the desert. They've disobeyed for 40 years, or they disobeyed and for 40 years they wandered. Sometimes there's a price. Explaining the 10 Commandments one more time. Some of them may have not heard it in 40 years. So he gives them the 10 Commandments, and at the end of doing so that you may live and prosper, and it's going to be a little phrase that we use, in the margins, emotional margins and energy, time margin to possess. And then he goes on. So that you and your children and their children after them may fear the Lord, so they will have the same opinion of God, as long and if you keep all his decrees and commands that I give you, so that you may enjoy long life. Exactly what he said at the end of chapter 5. And this is about pouring faith into our family, our children, our grandchildren, spouses, into one another. It's pouring faith in the family. No matter how your family's configured, whether it's you're a single parent, well, maybe you've got only grandchildren, kids and grandkids. The kids are older. You got grandkids. Whatever that configuration is, it's still always the opportunity to pour our faith into our family. But it's about pouring your faith, not forcing your faith. It's about pouring faith and not forcing faith, because sometimes that's what happens. When you don't have margins, if you find yourself forcing your faith on your kids, it's because you don't have margins. Because forcing happens with no margins. Forcing is demanding. Pouring is discussing. Forcing is about pressure. Pouring is about your presence. Forcing is coercing. Pouring is conversing. Forcing is motivated by guilt. Pouring is laced with grace. You can only pour when you have time and emotional space in your life. But you need to have big time of pouring faith into your own life. He says, so that he starts with us. He starts with the individual. He says, so that you are pouring your, faith into yourself, that you're doing what it takes to grow your faith, to deepen your relationship with Jesus. I know what it's like to be in a family where faith felt forced, and I almost bailed on faith because of it. He says, don't force it. It needs to be poured, and we pour when we have poured into our own self. Then we pour our faith into our family. You can't pour from an empty well or an empty jug. And if you want your kids and your spouse and your parents and your siblings and your grandkids to embrace a faith in Jesus will radically change their lives. If you want that, it happens only in the emotional and time margins of life. The second thing he says is this. It's in the margins that we have time to help your family understand what real love is. To understand what real love is. Look what he says. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. You see, we are to love God, he's saying here, with our entire being. But you cannot love God until you've experienced God's love. It says that he loved us first. God loved us so that we could love him. It was when God gave us the picture of true love, the right kind of love, and we began to experience it, we began to then pass it on to others. You see, God loved us and gives us this definition or this picture of love. And we are to pour that love, share that love with those who are in our relational circle in our family. We live in a culture that doesn't really know what love is. Love today is demanding. Love is self-focused, it's reciprocal. I only love when I'm loved back. It has strings attached, it's fragile, it's tied into feelings, and it so often gets confused with sexuality, and it's very superficial and easily tossed away. There's a picture of love that our culture has. We've got to change the picture because God's love is so different. No strings attached, non-reciprocal, patient, kind, not jealous, not self-seeking, keeps no records of wrong, protects, trusts, hopes, lasts. When we experience that, then we pour it into our family. But the only time that you can pour it in is in the margins, emotionally and with your time. You see, we don't normally grasp the fullness of the love of God until some human being who has already grasped it shoves it in our direction, loves us that way. And you can't rush in and out of loving and sharing love. Because one of the key aspects of God's love is his availability. He's always there for us. And if we want to demonstrate God's love when it comes to our family, love is spelled time, T-I-M-E. That's how you spell love. Part of loving someone is nurturing them. And that only happens with time and emotional capacity. Time is this concrete measurable that says, you gave me your time, you gave me your emotional best, and you poured love into me. That's how you know when you're loved. Thirdly, he says, in the margins, we have time to model godly character. He says, these commands that I give you today are to be on your hearts and then impress them on your children. We've always known parents have had tremendous influence on their kids, especially in the developing of character. But some research lately shows us that the influence is far beyond what we've imagined. The word impress here, it means to model, or that they see it through observation. We learn by looking at someone else's life. That's what impress means. It takes time to model your character. You don't see it in those little slivers of life. It needs extended time and emotional energy so they can observe your character. You see, what your kids see you do as they grow up, you will likely see when they're growing up. Let me say that again. What your kids see you do as they grow up is what you will likely see when they've grown up. That's a scary thought, isn't it? It's an encouraging thought, but it's scary at the same time. I remember one of our kids when they were in their teen years. I remember going by their bedroom one evening, and I kind of opened the door to say goodnight, and they had a little nightlight on, and they had a Bible and a journal opened on their bed. And I remember saying, well, that's pretty cool, in my head. And I said, oh, that's kind of neat that you're doing this. Is this something that you learned in youth group? Because that's kind of what I figured. And I remember what my daughter said to me. She said, no. I learned it by watching you every day go down to your little office first thing in the morning and do the same thing. But she had to see it. They had to know it. There had to be time to observe it. The power of example and observation takes time. But because you need time to model. Now, the key to this, I think is so important. These commands that we're giving you today are to be where? On your heart first. Character needs to be developed. We need time to develop our own character before we, push that character on others. We need to develop us, and then we need to impress it on others. We need to model love, that it's not tied into performance. We need to talk about how do you handle conflict properly? What does truth and honesty, integrity really look? How do we how do we express emotions the right way? The importance of uniqueness. There's so many things in character that we need to pour out, we need to impress on our kids, but it doesn't happen in the slivers, and it doesn't happen when you don't have emotional energy. Parents, you are the window where children get the first glimpse of who they are and what they're worth, and it's all modeled. Children learn what we live, and they need time to be in that classroom of your life so that they can learn from your example. And then lastly, he says this, in the margins we have time to talk about life. We have time to talk about life. He says, talk about them. He's talking about the commands. Talk about them when you sit at home And when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up, he's saying, you, as you do life, that's all he's saying. This is doing life. Talk about things while you're doing life. Everyday life. It's not about teaching times, it's about talking times. And if you don't have emotional energy and time to do life together, you can't talk about life together unless you do life together. And some of the best conversations I know I've had with Sue and with my kids is when they've got in the car or they've done something with me and we haven't sat down and say, let me have the talk about this. We just get talking. We talk about everyday life. And we were able to give examples and we were able to share. You share life together. And that's where you learn life together. Families, you don't learn. Families do not learn in the classroom. They learn through conversation, not through the formal but the informal, not planned but spontaneous as life happens. Something comes up and you are able to have a conversation about it right then, right there. Lessons learned, choices made, decisions, all those kind of things. Dealing with real life, using real life examples, this is how we grow. In fact, pivotal relationships are significant for spiritual growth. And parents, for us, for our kids, grandkids, but for spouses with one another, if we want to grow, we want to change, pivotal relationships make that happen. So what's the solution? Because there's a tug of war, right? You're going to have to make a decision to give up something in one of those two areas in order to make this happen. Pastor Andy Stanley, in his book, Choosing to Cheat, says you're going to have to cheat in one area in order to satisfy the other. In order to make it all work, you have to cheat one of these two areas in order to satisfy one of these areas. You're going to have to say no at times to one area so that you can say yes to the other. And so here's God's advice. Choose to cheat work for the sake of your family. God's advice is choose to cheat if you have to cheat somewhere because you don't have enough time to do it all. Choose to cheat the work side for the sake of your family. Because God knows when families crash, it's the greatest pain. He knows how negatively it impacts our lives and the lives of our family. I'm here to say this, and this, some of you go, yeah, but you don't understand. You just work at the church. It's easy, but I look in the real world. I'm here to tell you it's a lot less painful to get a new job than to get a new family. That seems obvious, right? Because work isn't a picnic. Sometimes it's difficult and challenging, competitive. There's politics, fights for position, stress and demands, all those kind of things. On the family side, there shouldn't be that, right? When we are together with family, when family is working right, there should be unconditional love, acceptance, the meeting of our deepest needs. Roles are appreciated. We give and receive love. So when you look at it, you think family is the obvious choice, but too often it's not. Do you know why? Because when we go to work, that's where we often get more accolades and recognition. The rewards of work are far more tangible. Progress is more easily measurable. Money is made, and identity is so often defined, so we gravitate there. So how do we deal with this tug of war? How do we do with it? Well, I think one of the things, before I give you these three things I think we should do, I think some of us need to do an inventory. There's apps on your phone now that you can inventory all the things you do with your time. I think it's worth some of us doing it, because I think we would get surprised of how we're using our time and go, uh-oh, I need to make some changes. But how do we deal with this? Well, number one, we just got to prioritize what's important. What's important? This is all about a priority. This is all about loyalty. Your family wants to believe they are the priority. They want you hear that they matter the most. They want to know they matter the most because of the emotional energy and time you have available for them. We can use the right words. We can say that family is most important, but then our actions actually demonstrate the opposite. And families sniff this out and they see it and they know. You can say, well, you're most important. They're going, yeah, right. A study was done on more than 300 couples, and they were asked the most important priority in their lives, and a huge percentage of them said each other and our family. Then they were asked to use their time money, and emotional energy as indicators. And they all said, boy, 80% said we say this is our priority, but our actions are not matching that priority. They tell a different story. And you're not going to get it right every time. Sometimes you're going to have to choose work over family. It's going to happen. It's not getting it right every time. It's just getting it right once in a while and letting that grow. Because time and not words, emotional energy and not words, are evidence that they're a priority. When work becomes a priority, then the feelings of family over time are rejection. And then there's resentment. If I was to sit down with your family and I said, what's the priority? What would they say? What do you think they would say? What might they say? It's a huge challenge. Guess why? Because your workplace wants your loyalty and to be your priority as well. You know, jobs continue these days to demand more and more emotional energy. They create, this is why conflict is created. Sometimes the crashes don't come until years later, too. Sometimes you can ignore it and get away with it. You can ignore family and get away with it. And eventually, years later, there's something happening. You go, what? Where did that happen? Why did that happen? That happened because of way back here. You don't have to get it perfectly, as I said. We just have to do it more often, and there needs to be progress. Prioritize what is important. Choose to make time available for your family. Now, what's really important about this is the wording I used. I did not say, choose to find time available for your family. Finding time is saying, you're kind of an inconvenience, but I will find time for you. Making time is a choice. We make a choice to make time. When you say, I'm going to make time for you, not just find time for you, it says you are a priority. And the reason that so many of us don't make time, instead we find time, is because we fear what'll happen if we choose to cheat work. That's why so many people don't make the decision. We figure, our family will understand. We've convinced them it's all for them. We play this game in our minds. If I don't do what they're asking me at work, it will lead to a missed promotion, no raise, termination, reputation in the marketplace. You know, whatever, something I'll be missing out on. You want to win the challenge? You got to choose to make time. So when you're filling out your schedule, you don't say, well, I'm going to put work first and then family second. You start with family and say, okay, what's the family responsibilities? Okay, I'm going to have to make work around some of these. Not all of them. Sometimes it can't be that way, but it has to be more often. Intending to do better doesn't get it done. It is choosing to make time available. And you know, it's not about getting fired. It's not about quitting your job and finding another one. It's learning to carefully manage and negotiate. I remember a number of years ago when I was in the marketplace, and I started this new job, and I noticed that everybody got there before the owner of the company, and everybody left just after he left. And I saw people that were working on stuff that they didn't even need to work on. They could just go home. But they didn't want to leave before the owner of the company left. And finally I said, this is crazy. I'm just kind of killing time here somehow to impress somebody. So I remember going into his office. And I remember saying, hey, you know what? I noticed this is going on. And he kind of laughed. He says, yeah, I noticed it too. I don't know why they're doing it. And I said, well, you know what? I need to be home by 5 o'clock because having dinner with my family is a priority. And he said, if you can get your work done in the time allotted, and he said, I believe you can. Not a problem. I don't care if you leave before me. I never have. Sometimes we just have to have that kind of conversation. And then lastly, this is an important one, just trust God to sort it all out because there's going to be pushback. But if God is at the center of the circle, just believe God is going to work this all out. You know, there could be negative consequences. But at the end of the day, it's about answering one question. Who will I miss the most? If one area of my life blows up, who will I miss the most, my work or my family? It's saying, hey, God, work out the details because I'm going to have to choose to cheat this workplace sometimes. The question I say is, do you believe God will provide financially even if you didn't get a raise or a promotion? Do you believe he's able to provide your identity and meaning and purpose that you're looking for in your job? Do you believe God is able to find you another job, a better job that could give you work-life balance if you lose your job? Do you believe God is able to help achieve more and less time for you to work smarter and better, get more done, close more deals? Do you trust God in all of this? If God is saying, this is what I want you to do, this is what I want you to do with your family, all of these things, these commands that I've given, I want these things to happen with your family. If God has said, do it, then he's going to sort it out. But we have to move from that mindset. If there's one thing I impress on you today, move from the mindset of finding time to making time. Instead of saying, oh, I've got to find time, no, choose to make time. And then find time to do work. The regrets of a family crash, no matter what causes them, whether it's time, whether it's lack of emotional margins, whether there's just been money issues, whether there's been infidelity, whether there's been any kind of circumstances, no matter what caused the family crash or is leading to it, it is the one that will hurt the most. Family crashes hurt the most to us and to our kids, and family extends beyond that. So if the family crash is the most painful one, then why don't we do what it takes to crash-proof our families? Make the choice to make the time for that which is important, because at the end of life, your company might send flowers, but your family will stand beside your bed as you're passing away. Don't have regrets when you look back. Choose now to make time. Choose now to sort out whatever the differences are in your relationship. Whatever that is, choose to sort it out, to fix it up, to do what it takes, as hard as it is, so that we don't face the pain, now or later, of a family that crashed. Let's pray. And so, Father God, we just pray this morning that you would just speak to us, convict us. I know there are people here, I'm sure, that are struggling with family issues right now. Maybe it's because of time. Maybe it's been a lack of emotional margins. Maybe they haven't poured into their family, or they haven't demonstrated good character. There's lots of reasons why things are happening. Maybe there's other reasons. Maybe there's choices that have been made, or maybe there's attitudes that have been demonstrated, or maybe it's the way money's got spent. But some relationships are hurting here today. God, you are the one who provides us with wisdom and insight, if we're willing to follow it, that can keep us from crash-proofing our family. And if they've already crashed, you will give us the wisdom and the grace and the strength, when it's possible, to rebuild those pieces and put them back into a loving family. So thank you, family, so much for it being the sort of the structure of life that you have given. And we most reflect your image when we live like you and love like you in our families. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.